Dad left me everything Kester said at the wake, swirling his glass of scotch. You're a financial burden. He said it with a shrug. A casual cruelty, as if I were a line item to be deleted from his ledger. By nightfall, he'd changed the locks. I stood in the rain outside the gates, the ones I painted in forest green, back when Kester was still losing baby teeth. My suitcase sat beside me, soaked through. The porch light never flickered on. He didn't wait 24 hours after the funeral. I rang the bell once. Just once. No answer. I didn't ring again. I stayed upright, even when my knees begged to bend. My husband had been in the ground for less than a day, and my son, the boy I once held through chicken pox and nightmares, had decided I was excess weight. I walked away, not because I had anywhere to go, but because I refused to beg. I took the last rideshare I could afford, the driver silent, except for the windshield wipers slicing through the rain. I kept my eyes forward, ignoring the buzz of my phone in my coat pocket. Kester probably sending some neatly worded transition support offer, as if money could plaster over what he'd done. The motel I checked into smelled of damp carpet and desperation. But the clerk didn't ask questions when I handed over my ID. That night, I peeled off my wet blouse, wrapped a towel around my shoulders, and sat at the edge of the thin mattress in the dark. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I just sat. I'd given that boy everything. Meals from nothing college funds, scraped from second jobs, and decades of patience through every tantrum, every arrogance. And now I was cast aside, like a rusted tool. I opened my battered suitcase, half expecting it to be empty, but tucked between my sweaters was a worn, leather-bound book, something Arthur had always kept in his study. My late husband. The title embossed on its spine caught the light federal inheritance law. And suddenly, something shifted in me. Quiet. Sharp. Steady. I reached for it. The echoes of Arthur's funeral were still clinging to me like the rain that hadn't stopped all day. My husband's cologne was still in my scarf, his ashes not yet buried. And yet, there I was, on a stranger's porch that night, a guest at a budget motel, because my own son had turned the key against me. Kester said it so cleanly, like he was settling accounts. "You've had a comfortable life, Mom, but you're not entitled to mine." That mine hit harder than I expected. He meant the house I decorated room by room, the garden I nursed through hurricanes and droughts, the life Arthur and I built from bare ground, brick by brick. But Kester had always been like this. Even as a child, his dreams were sharp-edged, the biggest bike, the front row seat, the highest grade, even when it meant pushing others down. Arthur had tried to temper him, to soften those hard ambitions. I tried too, but softness didn't interest Kester. Only winning did. Now he had it. The house, the inheritance, the $40 million empire Arthur had spent a lifetime building. And I had a suitcase and an old legal book Arthur left behind. I flipped through the pages under the yellow motel lamp, expecting nothing but footnotes and legal clauses. But inside the cover, something was tucked between the front flap and the leather spine. A folded piece of parchment paper. Arthur's stationery. I unfolded it carefully. A single line in his steady hand. If he forgets who built it, remind him who owns it. No signature, no greeting. Just those 11 words. I read it again. And again. Arthur was never careless with his words. If he left me this hidden inside that book, it meant something. Something legal. Something binding. He must have known what Kester would do. He must have left a way to stop him. I picked up my phone. Not to call Kester. I typed in the number of someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. "Evelyn Cole, attorney at law," said the voice on the line. "How can I help you?" I said only one word. "Arthur." Arthur had always said, "Understanding the law isn't about control, it's about protection." I used to think he was being dramatic, But now, with nothing to my name except a folded bank receipt and the bitterness left behind by my son, I understood. Arthur had always been deliberate. His words were blueprints. If he wrote this, it wasn't for comfort, it was for instruction. This wasn't a love note. This was strategy. I stared at the book again. Every page suddenly looked different. What else had he left buried in plain sight? Arthur had run every part of his life like a ledger, clear-ordered and nearly impossible to outmaneuver. So if he knew Kester would try to gut his legacy, then this note, this book, they weren't accidents. They were signals. Quiet flags left only for me. My hands steadied. I stood, walked to the desk and opened the drawer where I'd tossed the room's complimentary notepad. I started jotting everything I remembered from Arthur's final week's calls. He took in the study the late-night meetings with Evelyn, the boxes he sealed but never mailed. And one moment rose to the surface the last time he and I sat outside with coffee the morning after his last hospital stay, when he said, almost absently, "If they forget who built this, you'll remember who signed the first stone." I didn't understand it then, but I was starting to now. I returned to the house the next day not to beg. I'd told myself that over and over. I didn't want anything from Kester. I wanted access to the records Arthur kept so precisely, his tax ledgers, his business filings, the documentation he'd built our life around. I had every right to them, no matter what my son believed. The gate guard let me in without a word. I think he was too shocked to question it. The house felt colder, stripped of warmth. Even the sunlight looked reluctant coming through the windows. I walked through the foyer quietly past the grand staircase and into the hallway lined with family photos, only half of which were still hanging. Mine, it seemed, had already been removed. I headed straight for the library. Locked. I moved to the study next. The one Arthur had spent hours in every night for as long as I could remember. Also locked. I paused at the door, pressing my palm flat against the wood like it might still hold some warmth from him. But it didn't. Just cool, polished emptiness. Margaret passed by without stopping, arms full of linens that didn't need folding. She didn't meet my eyes. None of the staff did. I turned toward the side hallway, toward the sunroom that Arthur used to call his backup vault. The one place he kept duplicates of anything important, photocopies, notes, backups of the files he didn't trust to digital storage. But when I opened the drawer under the bookshelf, it was empty. He was erasing everything, or trying to. I heard voices in the next room, Kester's clipped and annoyed, followed by the lawyer's assistant trying to keep up. "She said it would be straightforward," Kester snapped. "I want confirmation. Now." I moved closer, staying just out of sight. The assistant's voice was lower. She said, "There's a delay. Final review." Something about trust conditions Kester interrupted with a sharp curse. He didn't look in control. He looked like a man who'd counted his winnings before the hand was played. And I knew then Arthur hadn't given him everything. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The office wasn't grand. No marble floors or velvet chairs. Just glass walls, clean lines, and the scent of burnt coffee lingering in the air. Evelyn Marin stood when I entered her tailored blazer, sharp, her eyes sharper. "I was wondering how long it would take you," she said, gesturing toward the chair across from her. "Arthur said you'd come." I sat, without a word, my heart steady, but my hands folded tight in my lap. She reached beneath the desk and lifted a thick binder. It landed between us with a soft thud. "Your husband's estate isn't simple," she said. "It's structured inside a layered trust, very deliberate, very controlled." She flipped it open to a section tabbed in red. Her finger traced the first paragraph, but her eyes were on me. "Kester can't touch a cent. Not unless certain conditions are met." I exhaled slowly. What kind of conditions? Her smile curved just a hint of satisfaction. He must co-execute a community redevelopment project one Arthur outlined in detail before his passing. A community-centered job training housing resources, all tied to a specific property. And me, I asked already knowing. You, she said, are required to be the co-executor. Equal signature power. Equal vote. Equal control. She let that land. If either of you refuses files a lawsuit or withdraws in any formal capacity, the money I asked. Half goes to the charities Arthur named, she said. The other half. She looked at me squarely. To you? I stared at the clause, the legal language crisp and inarguable. Arthur had locked it down so tight that even Kester's lawyers would need a crowbar and a miracle to break it. He'd planned this, not to punish our son, but to ensure he couldn't erase me. Evelyn leaned back in her chair. He didn't trust Kester to protect his legacy alone. I nodded, the corners of my mouth lifting not in joy, but recognition. No wonder Kester had been pacing. He thought he'd won. But Arthur made sure the game didn't end until I played my hand. And now Kester would have to decide pride or fortune. The knock came just after 9. Sharp. Calculated. Not frantic, not timid, just controlled like everything Kester did when he thought he held the upper hand. I opened the door and there he was, tailored coat, polished shoes, a watch too expensive for someone mourning. His eyes swept over the cramped apartment, hand-me-down armchair, chipped coffee table, my half-unpacked boxes by the wall. No flowers, no apology. Just a smirk dressed as diplomacy. I think we got off on the wrong foot, he said, walking in before I said a word. Look, I was overwhelmed. Dad's passing hit hard. All the paperwork, the lawyers. He trailed off, motioning vaguely at my coffee mug, as if even that offended him. I didn't mean what I said, he added. But he had. Every word. And we both knew it. I said nothing, letting him fill the space with practiced charm and soft manipulation. I spoke with Evelyn. He continued easing onto the edge of my thrifted couch. She mentioned this project. Community stuff. Symbolic, really. I thought, maybe we could be a team. He said it like he was offering me a role in a play, one he'd already written, directed, and starred in. I know how these things work. The cameras love a story. Mother and son rebuild together. Makes us both look good. Us both. I stayed standing, arms crossed, letting silence stretch just long enough to unsettle him. You'd get something, of course, he added, quickly. Living expenses, maybe a property or two. We could draw up a side agreement. Quiet, clean, just enough to check the boxes. I could feel the weight of Arthur's words in my coat pocket. The will protects those who protect legacy, not those who cave for convenience. Still, I didn't refuse. Not yet. I met his gaze, steady and unreadable. Send the documents, I said. I'll look them over. He stood nodding like we'd sealed a deal. But this wasn't about agreement. Not yet. This was about watching him squirm because for the first time in his life, Kester needed me more than I needed him. I didn't waste time. Evelyn and I sat down the next morning. Her office was quiet, clinical, full of sharp lines and sharper minds. She didn't blink when I said I wanted to add conditions. She nodded, clicked her pen, and said, "Tell me what you want. 3 estate properties outright in my name. A monthly living stipend, non-negotiable, and most importantly, public credit. My name would be listed alongside Kester's on every document, every photo, every announcement. No more being erased. If I was going to help build this, I'd be seen doing it." By the time we finished, the language was airtight. Evelyn double-checked each clause like a surgeon. "If he doesn't sign this," she said, tapping the front page, "he gets nothing." When Kester walked into the meeting room, he didn't greet me. He didn't look at Evelyn. He looked at the manila folder sitting between us like it was a loaded weapon. I slid it toward him. "What's this?" "My terms," I said. He flipped through the pages. I watched his jaw tighten. 3 properties. A stipend. Public credit. I didn't respond. He kept reading. Then the snap. The flare. You're extorting me. I leaned back in my chair, calm. No, I said. The will is extorting you. I'm just reading it properly. His fingers curled at the edges of the pages. You're enjoying this. Not the way you think. I held his stare. But I do enjoy knowing I was never the burden you made me out to be. He shoved the folder back. I'll have my lawyer look at it. Do that, Evelyn said, voice even. But any attempt to alter the stipulations breaks the trust. You know what happens then. He stood, straightened his collar, and walked out. No handshake, no thanks. But I saw it, that flicker of doubt behind his eyes. He'd walked in thinking I'd play the part of quiet mother grateful to be included. Instead, I'd handed him a truth he couldn't refute. And now he had to decide, accept the woman he cast out or lose everything he thought he'd won. He signed. Evelyn notarized it with a quiet nod, her stamp clicking against the page like a judge's gavel. Kester didn't look at me when he slid the documents across the table. He just muttered, "Let's get this over with," and stormed out like the pen had cost him more than pride. And just like that, the balance shifted. The papers went public by week's end. The press release was polished, the headline, "Tasteful Mother and Son Unite to Carry Out Arthur Calderon's Vision." Photos were taken. Smiles were staged. Kester's arm hovered behind my back like proximity could rewrite the past. But behind closed doors, we were no team. I showed up early. I shook hands. I memorized names. He showed up late, brought consultants with big ideas and no knowledge of zoning laws, and tried to bulldoze decisions with charm and checklists. But charm doesn't override co-executive authority, and checklists don't sign off on permits. I did. The city planners listened to me. The contractors asked me what Arthur would have wanted. I walked the development site with them every morning wearing boots instead of heels, holding a clipboard and a strong cup of coffee. Kester showed up once in Italian loafers and asked why the community garden couldn't be turned into a parking garage. They laughed. I didn't. By the third month, people stopped asking him questions altogether. The volunteers started coming to me directly. The neighborhood leaders invited me to speak at town halls. Local reporters asked for my quotes. They saw what Arthur had seen: someone who listened, someone who stayed, someone who didn't flinch when things got hard. And still, I kept my voice measured. I never embarrassed him. I didn't need to. His silence in meetings said enough. Every day that passed, I became the one steering the ship he thought he captained. And somewhere in that shift, I saw it in his eyes. Resentment, yes, but also something quieter. Something that looked a little like respect and a lot like fear. Because slowly, surely, they were no longer calling it Kester's project. They were calling it mine. 11 months. That's how long it took to turn cracked asphalt and abandoned lots into something that breathed. The Calderon Community Center stood like a promise, glass walls that reflected the morning light classrooms, waiting to be filled, gardens ready to grow. A building with roots and reach, exactly how Arthur had envisioned it. The ribbon cutting was everything Kester dreamed of. Media vans, politicians shaking hands, a podium surrounded by flashbulbs, and well-dressed strangers pretending to care. He stood beside me in a tailored suit, chin-high lips pulled into a press-perfect smile. But when the master of ceremonies reached for the microphone, he didn't offer it to Kester. He turned to me. I stepped forward, and for the first time, I felt no weight in my shoulders, no tremble in my hands. Kester didn't move. I heard his breath catch sharp, like he'd been slapped, but he didn't protest. He knew better. "Good morning," I began. I didn't thank Kester. I thanked Arthur for his vision, his patience, his belief that legacy wasn't built in bank accounts, but in lives touched. I thanked the builders who worked through storm and heat without cutting corners. I thanked the families who showed up, donated time, painted benches, planted trees. and I thanked the silence. The silence that had once been used to push me aside, but now let every word I said land like truth. By the time I stepped back, the applause was steady, real. It didn't come from the politicians. It came from the people. I glanced at Kester. His smile had flattened. His eyes were fixed ahead, not at me, not at the crowd. Just forward, like he was waiting for it to end. But it wasn't ending. The photos that ran in the papers the next day showed both of us, but only one of us was speaking. Only one of us had their name in the headline. That evening, as the crowd trickled home and the sky softened into a quiet blue, I slipped away down the side garden path, my heels brushing against the bricks we'd laid last month. And I knew in the calm that followed that Arthur's legacy wasn't just complete. It was protected. The trust executed on schedule. Kester got his $40 million. The wire transfer confirmation came through the morning after the ribbon-cutting one line of numbers that changed nothing about the man receiving it. And me, I got 3 property deeds in my name. I got the full legal recognition of my leadership on the Calderon project. I got public credit in every article, in every televised segment, in every speech replayed on the news. But more than that, I got something no inheritance could match. Closure. Not the kind that comes with revenge or a dramatic apology. Not the kind you beg for. The kind you earn by showing up, holding the line, refusing to break, even when the world you built turns its back on you. I stayed at the center until sundown that evening, helping the staff tidy up folding chairs, box unused flyers, sweep the entry hall. They joked with me now, laughed with me. They didn't see Kester's mother. They saw someone who had shown up when it mattered. When I finally stepped out onto the front walk, the lights inside glowed amber behind the tall glass panels. Laughter echoed from the main hall. Kids were already sketching chalk murals near the garden beds. My heels clicked over the brickwork I'd helped approve, helped pay for helped lay. I didn't look back. There was nothing left in that house Kester had claimed. Not really. The legacy my husband left us wasn't locked in wood-paneled offices or oil portraits hanging over cold fireplaces. It was here. In something built, not bought. In something lived, not owned. Arthur knew exactly what he was doing. He trusted me with the future because he knew I wouldn't trade it for comfort. I wouldn't bend to entitlement. I wouldn't be silenced even when silence was the easier choice. And I didn't need to win in his eyes because I already had. I kept his vision intact. I protected it the way no amount of money ever could. And then without a word, I walked toward my car keys in hand, heart steady. I had everything I needed.